As we continue our little journey through the yearbooks of yesteryear, Fort Huron High School, I thought it might be interesting to see some of the differences along the different decades of the senior class pictures. There were no class pictures in the 1900s, so these pictures you're looking at now represent the 1910s, the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. The 1960s was the last decade where you saw the boys wearing suits. By the time the 1970s rolled around, you saw mixtures of the boys wearing suits and shirts. And by the 1980s, you don't see suits anymore. Everything is very casual. Here we have the 1990s, the classes of 2000, and the classes of 2010s. The first baby pictures of the students appeared in the yearbook of 1919. And as you can see here, the baby pictures still continue in today's yearbooks, but this time with a little more description. You'd probably notice color creeping into these yearbooks. This is the first photograph I could find that was in color, and this is a 1960 yearbook. But the class photos weren't in color until 1981. Something else you may have noticed, that the hairstyles changed over the years as well, from the neatly trimmed haircuts of the 1960s to the long hair in the 1970s, and this applied to both boys and the girls. Something else that changed over the decades are the fashions of the young ladies at Fort Huron High. In this photograph here, taken in 1918, you can see the dresses touch the ground almost. By the 1940s, the skirts were still long. You could get an idea how long they are by that girl in the plaid on the left. They're way below the knee, but still not as long as they were in the early 1900s. And in the 1950s, they were almost knee length. By the 1960s, the skirts were above the knees. And in the 1970s, they were even a little bit more above the knees. And in the more current yearbooks, it appears that the young ladies are very fond of wearing jeans. I'm sure these young ladies would just dread wearing the clothing of the early 1900s, so much bulk there. And I'm sure the ladies of the early 1900s would cringe about wearing dresses that were so short, or even slacks for that matter. That was very unfeminine back then. So, to each their own. And we can't forget the boys. Back in the early 1900s, the boys wore suits and ties. And a couple of decades later, they shed their coats, but they still wore shirts and ties for the most part. But there was a couple of fellas there without ties. And in the 1950s, this is 57, the year I graduated, we wore a lot of khakis, along with a sport shirt or a sweater. In the 1960s, it looked like jeans were the thing to wear. And today, well, I'm not exactly sure what they're wearing, but it certainly is casual. Here's a little tidbit you may not know about the Fort Huron High School yearbook. Back in the 1900s, 1905, 1919, just about, there wasn't just one yearbook per year. And these are the yearbooks from 1905 to 1909 shown here. The first two are from 1905, and you can see one of them is a Christmas edition. The next three are from 1906. You can see the first one with a question mark, the second one is for April, and the third one is for Christmas. The one next to it is from 1907, and the first two in the second row are also from 1907. The next four yearbooks are from 1908, and the last two are from 1909. So as you can see, there wasn't just one yearbook per year. That all changed in the 1920s, and they start putting out one per year. Here's another tidbit you may not be aware of, especially if you're younger than me. But if you look at this yearbook here, there's something unusual about it, because it says January class of 1950. Yes, Virginia, there used to be 2 graduating classes per year, January and June. The split classes first started in 1929, because the picture you're looking at here is 1928. And as we go to the next one here, this is 1929. And you can see the 28 didn't say anything about January, June, but this picture does, the 1929 one. So beside each photograph, it said a little something, and then you can see that it says what month he graduated, either January or June. Each graduating class had their own class officers, as you can see in this photo, and they also had their own commencement, as you can see in this photo. This is the January graduating class. The split class wasn't just for seniors. The split class was all the way down into the elementary schools as well. My aunt remembers half of the class reading from one part of the book and the other half of the class reading from the other part of the book, and that would be Class A and Class B. It must have been very hard for the teachers back then to teach like that. This split system lasted until 1954 or possibly 1955. I have the 54 yearbook, is what you're looking at here, and this was still split classes. The 55 yearbook I don't have, so I'm not real sure. I know for 56, they didn't have split classes, and I graduated in 57, and they didn't have split classes. What was the reason for these split classes? Well, the consensus of opinion is it had to do with your birthday. If you had a late birthday, you didn't have to wait a year, and also if you weren't learning fast enough, you stayed back in January and only had to repeat a half a year. There's also another advantage. If for some reason you were held back because of sickness. My aunt was out with pneumonia for several weeks, and the teacher recommended to her parents to just hold her back for half a year. She wouldn't have to repeat the whole grade. So there was some advantage to that. Something else some of you younger people may not know is that the 9th grade freshman class was not always a part of the high school. It became a part of the high school in 1963, and this is the first yearbook that had the freshman class in it. Before this, most of the kids in Port Huron went to either the Garfield School or they went to the Washington School. I was surprised to see in the 1924 yearbook a 4-page section of the junior college, which appeared to be in its first year. So I think they were trying to get that information out there to the students of Port Huron High. So let's take a look at some of these photographs. It starts off saying, "We, the first class of Port Huron Junior College, submit to you this section of the 1923-24 student." I'll let you read the rest. Here we have a photograph of an 8-member faculty, and just looking down here at the caption, perhaps you recognize some of these names. And here we see the first class of the junior college, and look at some of the names here. And here we have the first basketball team. All these yearbooks are available online, so that's why I'm not taking a lot of time to go some of the text in there, because if you want to read more about it, you can go back to the yearbooks online and read the whole thing. I found that the yearbooks over the years reflected the status of whatever our nation was going through at the time. During World War I, Port Huron High School had a military group called PHHS-CC, which stood for the Port Huron High School Cadet Corps. I imagine this was very similar to an ROTC group. In this photograph, you see them doing their military exercises alongside the Port Huron High School. This looks like it was on the McMorran side of the high school, which is now the college, of course. On this page of the yearbook, it shows the commander of the Corps, and then it shows one of the groups posing for the camera down below here. In another of the yearbooks, it had a list of the boys who left high school and enlisted, as you can see here. And on another page, it showed pictures of those that enlisted. But in every war, there's always those that don't come home. And those fellows were also honored in the yearbook. If you notice at the top of this poem, it says, "Our 4 gold stars." You might think those 4 gold stars refers to the fact that they died as heroes in the war, but that wasn't the case. They were actually referring to actual stars that were placed on banners or flags. A blue star on a flag meant that that family and that home had someone that was serving in the military. And a gold star on a flag meant that someone in the military didn't come home to that family. They were killed in action. These flags were proudly hung on the porch of a family home, or in most cases they hung in the window because they weren't exposed to the outdoor elements. These flags were very prominently displayed in World War I and World War II. Mothers were called either by the fact that she's a Blue Star mother or she was a Gold Star mother. But by the time the Korean War and the Vietnam War rolled around, you didn't see these flags anymore. On this page of the student yearbook you're looking at now, you can see that the alumni of the high school was honored with this flag, which showed that there was 19 alumni students that were killed in action during World War I, and there was 1,224 students from Port Huron High School that served in the military during that time. In another wartime yearbook, we found this: "We, the students of Port Huron High School, are proud of our young men and women who have entered the service of our country. May they in their new work be as efficient and fine as they were here with us." And they used a military theme to separate the different sections of their books. This section was for the seniors, and this was for athletics. I'm not sure if that umpire was supposed to be umpiring a game or umpiring a dispute between the Army and the Navy. And this one for activities in the yearbook, and it shows an enlisted man peeling potatoes. And during World War II, you see the cover of the yearbook depicts a military plane with the word student on it, PHHS, in 1945. And the military theme was carried out through most of the book. And this is an example of that theme that was used in this book. I also found this ad placed in the student yearbook from Moser Jewelers. It says, "Remember our soldier boy. A wrist radio watch will be a good friend to him. We have them, $4.25 to $45. The yearbook that was put out during the Vietnam era had this remembrance for those that lost their lives. They had a picture of the young men in their yearbook, and then they also had the panel in the section where you could find their name engraved on the Vietnam Memorial. I found this in one of our yearbooks regarding our flag, and I'd like to read part of it. "The American flag stands for thousands of lives given for a cause just as sacred as that of Christ. It stands for your love of brothers, sons, and fathers who have fought and are fighting for the red, white, and blue. Paying homage to the flag is not a thing to be ashamed of, for you are reverencing George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, our present leader, and all the sailors and soldiers who have fought and died for our country and flag. You who are uncertain as to the proper respect due the flag, remember that anything courteous is the correct thing to do. This war is going to be the chief medium through which patriotism for country and flag will be instilled." Folks, I think today in this country, patriotism is not the same anymore. You can see it in the way people treat our flag today. They have no idea what the flag means to Americans. the price that was paid that we could fly that flag proudly, the lives that were lost so we could have that flag. People of my age realize that the flag flying over our country today could have just as easily been a German flag or a Japanese flag. And the reason they don't fly over us is right here. These crosses represent the millions of young men that lost their lives in these wars, and millions more that were wounded and disabled, so that we could have the privilege today, if you want to call it that, the freedom today, if you want to call it freedom, to disrespect our flag. I know our country is divided today, and I know some perhaps wouldn't agree with me. I'm not against a just protest. I just don't think it should be done at the expense of our flag. It's like the frog being boiled in the water. I didn't even realize till I went back through all these yearbooks how patriotic our country used to be compared to what it is today. Well, I thought I'd be done with the yearbooks by now, but there's a lot of good things in here I still like to share with you. So join me in my next video, and we'll see what there is to see.